For years, he tended his horses like no other. But when a strange swelling appeared on his trusted stallion's leg, he never imagined the secret it would unveil on that would shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, loss, and hidden treasures. Drop a comment where you're watching from, and if you love these wild tales, don't forget to subscribe. Now, saddle up, this story's about to take you on a ride you'll never forget. I never thought a horse could teach me so much about trust, patience, and the secrets we all carry beneath the surface. After more than 30 years of tending to my ranch and riding those vast, dusty trails, I believed I had seen every quirk and ailment a horse could get. But Thunder, my steadfast companion for nearly a decade, was about to challenge every bit of that belief. It started almost like any other minor injuria, swelling on his left hind leg just above the fetlock. At first I thought it was nothing more than a bruise or a bump from the rocky terrain around my property. Horses are tough creatures, and Thunder was no exception. He carried me through cattle drives, harsh winters, and scorching summers without a single complaint. That swelling, though, kept growing. For 3 weeks I watched it stubbornly expand. It was hard and oddly shaped, not soft like a typical abscess or infection. Every morning I'd walk out to the corral and check on him, my hand resting lightly over that strange lump. The sun would rise behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the dusty ground, and Thunder's calm, dark eyes would meet mine. There was something in that look, steady, patient, like he was waiting for me to figure it out. But I couldn't. No matter how much I tried, my knowledge of horses and ranch life was no match for the mystery growing on his leg. I applied ointments, wrapped the area carefully, and hoped for the best. But the lump only grew bigger and harder, almost as if it was alive. The vets in this part of the country were few and far between, and Dr. Harper, the nearest one, wouldn't be making it to my ranch for another 2 weeks. That was 2 weeks too long. I knew I had to act before whatever was inside that swelling caused Thunder real harm. I saddled him up and decided to take the long, rough ride to Cedar Valley, where a temporary clinic had been set up. Thunder was a trooper, moving steadily despite the discomfort, his breath steady but heavy. The terrain was unforgiving, rocky paths, thorny bushes, and loose dirt, but he never faltered. Arriving at the clinic, I found Dr. Harper attending to a calf with a broken leg. The man was weathered but sharp, and I could see the concern in his eyes as he turned his attention to Thunder's leg. The swelling looked different up close, the skin stretched tight and shiny, almost translucent in spots. The doctor's hands were steady as he examined the growth, pressing and prodding with care. After a thorough inspection, he shook his head slowly. "This isn't a typical abscess or tumor," he said. "There's no heat or tenderness that suggests infection. It feels like something solid, maybe multiple objects, wrapped inside a protective capsule." My stomach twisted. Solid objects? Inside Thunder's leg? The idea seemed absurd, yet I could see the truth in the doctor's eyes. "We're going to have to make an incision," he told me. "Remove whatever's inside before it spreads or causes permanent damage." Thunder stood quietly, sensing the tension but calm enough to trust us. The sedative Dr. Harper administered helped keep him still, but I could feel my heart pounding with every moment that passed. When the scalpel pierced the stretched skin, it slid through with surprising ease. Clear fluid oozed out first, but then something utterly unexpected began to emerge, small bundles, carefully wrapped in oily leather. The doctor and I stared in disbelief as he slowly unwrapped the first bundle. Inside were cut gemstones, emeralds, sapphires, diamonds, each perfectly faceted and gleaming even in the dim light of the clinic. My breath caught. These weren't just any stones, they were treasures, hidden beneath me horse's skin. I had no idea then how deep this mystery went, but as the bundles kept coming, each more astonishing than the last, I knew that Thunder wasn't just carrying a physical burden. He was carrying a secret from a past filled with desperation, sacrifice, and love that defied explanation. That day marked the beginning of a journey far beyond the dusty ranch I'd called home for so long, a journey that would test my understanding of value, loyalty, and the true meaning of treasure. The weight of those gemstones in my hands felt surreal. How had something so valuable, so carefully crafted, ended up hidden beneath the skin of my horse? I'd spent years working this land, trusting Thunder with every step, never imagining he carried a fortune embedded inside him. Yet here they were, glimmering evidence of a secret I'd never dreamed of uncovering. Dr. Harper carefully laid the stones on a cloth, each one catching the light like a flicker of forgotten history. He shook his head, his brow furrowed with concern. This isn't normal, not by any stretch. Someone went to great lengths to surgically implant these gems inside Thunder. It's more than just a hiding spot, it's a vault concealed within living flesh. I nodded slowly, still trying to wrap my mind around it all. Whoever had done this had to be desperate, skilled, and deeply cautious. The stones weren't just tossed in carelessly. They were wrapped in treated leather, preserved as if waiting for retrieval. I thought about the stories old-timers whispered about the war years, when people hid their valuables in the strangest places to keep them from looters or enemies. But a horse's leg, that was beyond anything I'd heard. It was cruel and brilliant, at once an animal bearing the burden of human greed and survival. As the afternoon faded, I watched Thunder resting quietly in the stall, his leg wrapped gently in bandages. Despite everything, he seemed calm, almost relieved, as if the strange weight pressing inside him had finally eased. I ran my fingers through his mane and felt a deep gratitude mixed with sorrow. What had he endured all these years, carrying this secret pain? That night I couldn't sleep. The gemstones sat on my table, each one a silent witness to a story waiting to be told. I knew I had to find out who had put them there and why. This was more than just a ranching mystery. It was a piece of someone's life, preserved in a way that was both painful and poetic. The next morning, I began asking around the nearby towns and ranches, hoping someone might recognize the gems or know of a story that matched. The stones themselves were exquisite, clearly cut by a master jeweler. A few local jewelers examined photos I took and confirmed the craftsmanship was rare, likely from the East Coast or even Europe. One name kept coming up in conversations: an old jeweler's family that had vanished decades ago after fleeing their home during the war. Rumors said they hid their entire collection to keep it safe, but nobody knew exactly where or how. It made me think of the horse, the mysterious swelling, and the surgical precision needed to implant those stones. Days later, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. He was an older man, walking slowly but with a purposeful air. His eyes were sharp, carrying a sadness that felt familiar. When he saw Thunder, something shifted in his expression, a mixture of recognition and grief. He introduced himself as Martin Caldwell, the son of a jeweler who had once owned a prized horse stolen during the chaos of wartime. The pieces began to fall into place: his family's legacy, the loss of their precious stones, and the desperate measures they'd taken to protect them. Martin told me stories of his mother, Elizabeth, a master gem cutter, whose work was known for its flawless artistry and emotional depth. When the war tore their lives apart, she and Martin's father had to make impossible choices. To protect her collection, they found the veterinarian willing to help hide the gems in their trusted horse, hoping to retrieve them once the danger passed. Elizabeth's death from illness shortly after forced Martin's father to flee alone, losing track of the horse and most of their wealth. For years, Martin had searched for the horse, following rumors and old leads that always seemed to end in dead ends. Now, standing before me and Thunder, it was like fate had finally answered. I felt a mixture of respect and sadness listening to Martin. This wasn't just a story about valuable stones. It was about love, loss, and a promise that spanned generations. The horse, once just an animal to me, was now a living testament to that promise. But there was a difficult decision ahead. Martin wanted to buy back the gemstones, hoping to preserve his mother's artistic legacy and fulfill the dream she'd never had a chance to complete. I could see the longing in his eyes, the weight of years spent chasing a memory. Yet Thunder and I had formed a bond over the years, one built on trust, pain, and countless shared moments. Handing over the stones and possibly the horse would mean breaking that bond. As I watched Thunder graze in the fading light, I realized that this story wasn't just about who owned the stones or the horse. It was about understanding what truly matters, the meaning of home, loyalty, and the legacies we choose to honor. That night, I sat by the fire, turning over Martin's offer in my mind. The gems on my table caught the firelight, sparkling like stars caught in stone. Money could change my life, make the ranch easier, safer. But was that worth the price of losing Thunder? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Whatever I decided, it would have to respect the past, the present, and the bond that had grown quietly, stubbornly between me and my horse. The morning sun seeped through the cracks in the wooden barn walls, casting golden beams on Thunder's resting form. I was awake early, the weight of last night's thoughts pressing down on me like the Texas heat that would soon settle over the ranch. I sat at the kitchen table, the gemstones spread out before me again, each one a small, brilliant world that had traveled a long and perilous journey just to end up here. The ranch felt quieter, without the usual sounds of horses' hooves clattering across the dirt or the low hum of cattle in the distance. Thunder had been a constant companion, steady and strong for nearly 10 years. I remember the day I first bought him, a wild stallion from a trader who said he came from the east. Back then, I cared more about his strength and stamina than his history, but now, every detail seemed connected to that buried past. Martin Caldwell's visit had changed everything. His stories about his mother Elizabeth, the gem cutter, and the desperate decision to hide their treasures inside their horse brought the past to life in ways I couldn't ignore. I knew the stones weren't just valuable, they carried a legacy of artistry, love, and loss. I reached for one of the emeralds, cool and smooth in my palm, and ran my fingers over its carefully carved facets. Each one reflected the morning light, sparkling like a secret waiting to be told. I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. These stones were more than just riches, they were a piece of someone's soul. As the day wore on, Martin stayed around the ranch, helping with chores and learning the rhythms of the land. It was strange, seeing a man so connected to a past I barely understood, trying to reclaim a life lost to time. He was quiet but kind, and Thunder seemed to recognize something in him, an unspoken bond that went beyond words. We worked side by side, and I couldn't help but notice how Martin's eyes often drifted toward the barn, where Thunder rested. There was a mixture of hope and sorrow in his gaze, like he was searching for something that had been missing for years. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, I found Martin sitting by the fire, staring at the stones. The air was thick with silence, the kind that settles when words are too heavy to speak. I finally broke the quiet. "You want the stones back. I understand that. But what about Thunder?" He looked up, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "I want him too, but I know it's not just about possession. He's been with you through so much." There was honesty in his voice, tinged with regret. "Elizabeth and my father made a promise to protect their legacy, but I want more than just the stones. I want to honor the life they had, the sacrifices they made." His words struck a chord deep inside me. It wasn't just a transaction, it was about preserving history, love, and memory. That night I couldn't sleep again. I thought about the long ride to Cedar Valley, the doctor's surprise at the gemstones, and the countless miles Thunder and I had traveled together. I realized that this story wasn't just about hidden treasures, it was about the hidden parts of ourselves we carry, the bonds that shape us, and the legacies we choose to leave behind. The next morning I made a decision. I invited Martin to ride out with me, to see the ranch the way I did, through the eyes of a man who had fought to protect something precious. As we rode across the open fields, the wind carrying the scent of earth and grass, I shared stories of Thunder's strength, loyalty, and the quiet moments that made this place home. Martin listened, nodding slowly, his expression softening with each tale. When we stopped by the creek where I used to water the horses, he turned to me and said, "I see now that the real treasure isn't just the stones, It's the life you've built, the bond you share with thunder. We rode back in silence, both of us carrying a new understanding. That evening, Martin made an offer not just to buy the gemstones, but to partner in preserving Elizabeth's legacy and caring for Thunder together. He wanted to bring his family's artistry to the ranch, to create something that honored the past and looked to the future. I looked at Thunder, who was resting quietly in the corral, his eyes reflecting the fading light. The horse that had carried so much weight, both physical and emotional, deserved peace and respect. I nodded to Martin. Let's do it. For Elizabeth, for Thunder, and for the stories we're still writing. As the stars blanketed the night sky, I felt a quiet hope settle over the ranch, a promise that some treasures, no matter how deeply buried, were meant to bring people together rather than tear them apart. The next weeks were a strange blend of old routines and new beginnings. Thunder seemed lighter somehow, as if the burden he'd carried under his skin for years had finally been lifted. The swelling on his leg was gone, replaced by a faint scar that I traced with a careful finger every now and then. That scar wasn't just a mark of surgery, it was a reminder of the secrets he had carried silently, a testament to endurance that words could never capture. Martin and I began working together, blending the world of ranch life with the legacy of gem cutting that his family had preserved through tragedy and hope. His knowledge of stones, their history, and the artistry behind them fascinated me. He spoke of his mother, Elizabeth, with reverence, her hands shaping rough stones into treasures, her passion evident in every facet. It was a craft that required patience and vision, qualities I'd long admired in Thunder, but never thought connected in such a way. As Martin set up a small workshop in one of the old barns, transforming dusty corners into a space filled with light, tools, and the scent of polished wood, I found myself drawn into that world. I helped with odd jobs, fetching supplies, or simply listening as he told stories about his family's past and the wars that had forced them to scatter like leaves in a storm. Despite the bond growing between us, I often caught myself glancing at Thunder, who stood quietly in the corral, eyes calm but watchful. The horse had been through more than any of us could imagine, his body bearing wounds no one had seen, his spirit carrying memories both painful and profound. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the air turned cool, Martin and I sat outside by the fire pit, the gemstones gleaming softly in a leather pouch beside us. The ranch was quiet, except for the occasional hoot of an owl and the distant rustling of leaves in the wind. It was in moments like that I felt the weight of everything, the past, the present, and the uncertain future. You ever think about how much history is hidden beneath the surface? Martin asked quietly, his gaze fixed on the glowing embers, not just in stones or scars, but in people, in places like this ranch, where every tree and stone has a story. I nodded slowly. I've seen a lot in my time, but Thunder's story, it's something else. He carried a secret that wasn't just his own, but belonged to a family, a legacy. Martin's eyes met mine, and now that legacy lives here, not just in these gems, but in this land, this life. The next day, we began planning a way to share Elizabeth's story, not just through the gems, but through the ranch itself. We talked about hosting small exhibits, inviting locals and travelers alike to see the stones and hear the history behind them. It was an opportunity to preserve a memory and honor the sacrifices made to protect it. Life at the ranch adjusted to this new rhythm. The mornings still started with the familiar sounds of hooves on dirt and the soft neighs of horses waking, but the days grew richer with purpose. I found myself telling visitors about Thunder's remarkable journey, careful to respect the privacy of those involved, but eager to share the wonder of what we'd uncovered. Thunder became more than just a horse. He was a living symbol of resilience, a bridge between past and present. I could see how he responded to the change, calmer and more at peace, as if understanding that his burden had transformed into something meaningful. One afternoon, as I worked fixing a fence near the corral, Martin approached with a small box wrapped in cloth. Elizabeth always believed that every stone had a story to tell, he said softly. She wanted her work to be more than just jewelry. It was a way to connect with people, to keep memories alive. He carefully unwrapped the box to reveal a delicate pendant, a small emerald cut into the shape of a leaf, its facets catching the sunlight in a dance of green and gold. This was her favorite, Martin said. She wanted it to stay with the horse, as a reminder that beauty can grow even in the hardest places. I took the pendant in my hands, feeling the smooth edges and the quiet strength it held. I looked up at Thunder, who was grazing nearby, the afternoon light making his coat shine like burnished copper. In that moment, I realized the true meaning of what we'd found. The gemstones weren't just treasure, they were stories of love, loss, endurance, and hope. They were the pieces of a life, interrupted but not forgotten, carried forward by a horse who had unknowingly become a guardian of that legacy. As the seasons changed and the ranch settled into this new chapter, I understood that the greatest treasures are not the ones hidden beneath the surface, but the bonds we forge and the memories we choose to honor. Thunder and I had been part of something bigger than ourselves, a story that would live on far beyond the dusty trails and quiet fields we called home. The days grew longer as summer stretched its fingers across the ranch, and with the heat came a steady rhythm to our new life. Thunder and I fell into a quiet companionship, deeper now, as if the shared secret beneath his skin had forged a bond stronger than before. Martin's presence was a steady one to his quiet determination to preserve his mother's legacy, blending with the raw simplicity of ranch life. The workshop buzzed with activity most mornings. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, catching motes of sawdust and stone dust that floated like tiny stars. Martin's hands moved deftly over tools I'd never known, shaping and polishing, turning rough gems into shining stories. I listened often as he spoke of techniques passed down through generations, and how each cut and facet held a purpose beyond beauty. It was a conversation with time itself. One morning, as the rooster crowed and the first pale light broke over the hills, I found Martin bent over a table strewn with sketches and gem samples. His brow was furrowed, lips pressed in concentration. "Something wrong?" I asked, leaning in. He looked up, a rare smile breaking his serious expression. "No, just thinking about how to honor Elizabeth's work here, not just by showing the stones, but by creating something new, something that speaks to both her past and the present life on this ranch." I nodded slowly. It made sense. The ranch wasn't just a backdrop to these gems' story, it was now part of it, a living testament to survival and transformation. As the weeks passed, Martin and I began crafting plans for a small gallery space, part workshop, part exhibit. We would invite visitors to learn not just about the jewels, but about the story of a family torn apart by war, and a horse that carried their treasure and memories. It was a story worth telling, a reminder of how much weight history carries beneath the surface. One afternoon, while tending to Thunder near the creek, I noticed how he paused, ears twitching as if listening to something distant. His gaze drifted toward the old dirt road leading into the ranch. I followed his eyes, but saw nothing unusual, just the familiar landscape, sunlit and peaceful. Still, that moment lingered with me, a silent question hanging in the air. Later that day, a letter Aravita worn envelope, the handwriting elegant but hurried. It was from a woman named Claire, claiming to be a historian who had been researching Elizabeth Caldwell's life and work. She had heard about the gemstones and the ranch, and she wanted to visit, hoping to piece together more of the story. Martin was cautious but intrigued. I was curious, too. Perhaps this was a chance to uncover the parts of the past still shrouded in mystery. When Claire arrived, she brought with her a quiet intensity. Her eyes sparkled with passion as she examined the gemstones and listened to our tale. She carried notebooks filled with sketches, old photographs, and letters she had collected from archives and distant relatives. Over the next few days, Claire helped us uncover new layers of Elizabeth's story, her early years as an apprentice, the love and partnership with Martin's father, the heartbreak of war and loss. Each revelation was like a thread, weaving us closer to the truth, connecting the past with our present. But there was one piece that troubled Clary, a legend whispered among Elizabeth's friends about a secret design she'd been working on before her death. A final masterpiece, a collection meant to symbolize hope and resilience, but never completed. We all felt the weight of that unfinished story. It was as if Elizabeth's spirit still lingered, urging us to carry on her work. One evening, sitting around the fire, Claire shared her thoughts. This ranch, Thunder, the gems, they're more than history. They're a living testament to survival, to the beauty that can rise from pain. And your story, Tobias, is now part of that legacy. I looked at Thunder, who stood quietly in the shadows, the last rays of sunlight catching the shine in his coat. He was more than a horse. He was a symbol of endurance, a guardian of memories. As night fell and stars blanketed the sky, I realized that this journey was far from over. There were more stories to tell, more treasures to uncover, not just in gemstones, but in the bonds we forge and the legacies we choose to protect. The weeks that followed Claire's arrival brought a renewed sense of purpose to the ranch. Her research unlocked parts of Elizabeth Caldwell's life that had been buried beneath decades of silence, and it was as if the past was reaching out, beckoning us to understand not only her work, but the very essence of why those gemstones had been hidden so carefully in Thunder's leg. I found myself drawn into the stories Claire uncovered, piecing together the life of a woman who had faced unimaginable hardship, yet never lost her vision for beauty and hope. Elizabeth's work was more than craft. It was her language of resistance against a world tearing itself apart. Every gemstone she cut was an act of defiance, a quiet promise that life could still hold meaning even in the darkest times. Thunder, as if sensing the significance of these revelations, became calmer, almost contemplative. His eyes held a depth that I hadn't noticed before, reflecting a wisdom born of years, carrying a secret that transcended mere wealth. One morning, while I was out fixing a fence near the edge of the property, Martin and Claire approached with a box wrapped in faded cloth. Inside were fragments of Elizabeth's unfinished masterpiece, a collection of cut stones meant to form a necklace symbolizing resilience, hope, and renewal. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she laid the pieces out on the table in the workshop. This was her last project, she explained. She wanted to create something that would tell a story not just of loss, but of rebirth. A reminder that even broken things can shine. The weight of those words settled on me like a slow rain. I thought about Thunder, who had carried those stones hidden beneath his skin for so many years, unknowingly safeguarding a legacy far greater than any man or treasure. We decided then that completing Elizabeth's necklace would be our tribute to her, to the past, and to the future we were building here on the ranch. Martin took on the task with a quiet determination, working late into the nights, guided by the sketches and notes Claire had uncovered. Meanwhile, life on the ranch settled into a rhythm of work and reflection. Thunder and I shared long rides across the open fields, the wind carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. The horse moved with a newfound grace, his scars a testament to survival but no longer a source of pain. One afternoon, as we rode toward the distant hills, I noticed Thunder suddenly stop, ears alert. He sniffed the air and turned his head toward a narrow path leading into the woods. Something about his posture told me he recognized something familiar from a past I couldn't see. Curious, I followed as Thunder led me down the path. The trees thickened, the sunlight filtering through leaves in shifting patterns. At the end of the trail, hidden beneath overgrown vines and fallen branches, we found the remains of an old cabin, weathered, crumbling but still standing against the passage of time. It was a place frozen in history, and as I stepped inside, I could almost hear the echoes of the past, the whispered conversations, the sound of a jeweler's tools, the soft murmur of hope and fear intertwined. Claire joined us later that day, her eyes wide with recognition as she examined the site. "This was where Elizabeth worked during the war," she said softly. "She came here to hide her work and her pain. It's incredible that it's still here, waiting." We spent hours exploring, uncovering small relic stools, fragments of sketches, a leather-bound journal that seemed to hold Elizabeth's innermost thoughts. The journal was fragile, pages yellowed and edges torn, but it was a treasure beyond measure. Reading her words, I felt connected to a woman I had never met, but whose courage and artistry had touched so many lives. Elizabeth's story was no longer just history. It was part of the land, part of Thunder, and now part of me. That night, sitting by the fire with Martin and Claire, I realized that this journey was about more than hidden gems or forgotten legacies. It was about the resilience of the human spirit, the unexpected ways love and hope endure, and the stories we choose to carry forward. Thunder nuzzled my shoulder, his presence a quiet reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't buried deep there right beside us, waiting to be noticed. Days passed with a steady pulse of work, reflection, and quiet moments that felt heavier than any noise. The old cabin we discovered became a sacred place for use, a link to Elizabeth's life and the struggles she had endured in silence. Each day, I found myself drawn back to that humble shelter in the woods, where echoes of the past seemed to whisper through the cracked wooden walls. Martin was deep into crafting Elizabeth's final masterpiece, the necklace that would unite the scattered gemstones and incomplete dreams into a symbol of hope. Watching his hands move over the stones with reverence, I realized that this project wasn't just about the gems, it was about healing wounds that spanned generations. Claire spent hours transcribing Elizabeth's journal, her voice soft and careful as she read aloud the words of a woman who had seen beauty in brokenness and strength in vulnerability. Those readings became a ritual, filling the ranch house with a presence that was both haunting and comforting. One evening, as twilight bled into night and the stars blinked awake, I stood outside the workshop, gazing at Thunder resting quietly nearby. His calm eyes reflected the fading light, and I couldn't help but feel a profound gratitude for the horse who had carried so much more than his own weight. The past was no longer hidden beneath skin or dirt. It had found a voice through us, through the stones, through stories spoken and unspoken. I knew that our lives had been forever changed by the secret that had once caused so much pain. But even as the pieces came together, I felt a subtle, uneasy question lingering at the edges of my thoughts. The gemstones and stories were powerful, but there was something about the legacy left behind that still felt incomplete. One morning, a visitor arrived unexpectedly, a man whose presence stirred the air with something electric. His name was Lucas Caldwell, Ezra's younger brother, a man whose eyes carried the weight of the family's history and the unspoken burdens of loss. Lucas's arrival brought a new tension, a reminder that the past wasn't always a quiet echo, but sometimes a living force demanding reckoning. He approached cautiously but with purpose, his gaze locking onto Thunder as if searching for answers. I noticed the way his hands trembled slightly, betraying a vulnerability beneath his stern exterior. "I've heard stories," Lucas said quietly, "about the horse carrying more than just stones, about the family's sacrifices and the price they paid." I nodded, sensing that this was a moment where old wounds might open, but also where healing could begin. Lucas shared fragments of the family's history. I hadn't known the debts, the broken promises, the guilt that had shadowed their lives since Elizabeth's death. He spoke of his regret at not being there, of the burden of watching from afar while his brother fought to protect what little they had left. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows over the ranch, I realized that Lucas's arrival was not just a coincidence. It was part of the ongoing story, one that demanded understanding and forgiveness. Thunder, standing between us, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. His ears flicked, eyes steady and unblinking, as if urging us to find peace. Over the following days, Lucas worked alongside us, His initial reserve softened, revealing a man desperate to reconcile with a past that had haunted him. He and Martin found common ground in their shared love for Elizabeth's legacy, working together to honor her vision. I watched as the family's fractured history began to mend, piece by fragile piece, much like the gemstones Martin so carefully polished and set. The ranch, once a place of quiet survival, transformed into a sanctuary of healing and hope. In that transformation, I understood the true meaning of treasure, not the glitter of cut stones, but the bonds we rebuild, the forgiveness we offer, and the stories we choose to carry forward. Thunder, patient and steady, remained our silent guardian, embodying the resilience and loyalty that had carried us all through. Lucas's presence settled into the ranch like a slow-burning ember, sometimes flickering with tension, but mostly glowing steadily, warming the cold spaces that had long been untouched. It was strange to see how a man who once seemed a stranger had begun to blend into the rhythms of this place, drawn in by a shared history that refused to stay buried. We spent countless hours piecing together Elizabeth's past through her journal entries, letters, and the stories Lucas brought with him, stories of love, sacrifice, and the determination to protect something precious even when the world was falling apart. It was clear Elizabeth's legacy wasn't just in the gemstones or the necklace Martin was crafting, it was in the spirit she left behind, a spirit that had taken residence here on this ranch in Thunder, and in all of us. The workshop became a sanctuary of creation and remembrance. Martin, meticulous and patient, shaped each stone with care, as if honoring Elizabeth's very breath with every cut. I found myself often watching him work, feeling a quiet awe at the transformation unfolding, rough stones becoming brilliant jewels, fractured pieces becoming a whole. Thunder always goes by, carried himself with a new kind of grace, as if the burden he once bore was now a story he was proud to tell. His scars had faded into memories, replaced by a calm dignity that reminded me daily of the resilience beneath his surface. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the earth and the scent of fresh hay filled the air, Lucas approached me quietly. "There's something I need to show you," he said, his voice low. Curiosity piqued, I followed him to the edge of the property, where an old rusted gate led to a part of the land I'd rarely explored. Beyond the gate lay a small, neglected orchard, trees heavy with unpicked fruit and tangled branches. Lucas paused beneath an ancient apple tree, its gnarled limbs casting twisted shadows. "This is where Elizabeth used to come to think," he explained. "A place of peace amidst the chaos." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, weathered and creased. "I found this in one of her drawers plans for a garden she wanted to create here. A garden of resilience, like her necklace, full of plants that could survive droughts and storms." I looked around at the overgrown orchard, imagining it transformed into a vibrant garden, a living tribute to Elizabeth's enduring spirit. Inspired, we set to work clearing the land, nurturing it back to life. Planting drought-resistant flowers, herbs, and trees, we created a space that mirrored the themes of the necklace: strength, renewal, and hope. As days turned into weeks, the garden flourished, and with it, our connection to Elizabeth's legacy deepened. Visitors came, drawn not only by the gemstones but by the story of a woman whose life was etched into every leaf and petal. One evening, sitting by the fire with Martin and Lucas, I realized how far we'd come from a mysterious swelling on a horse's leg to a thriving ranch, pulsing with history and life. It wasn't just a place of work anymore. It was a sanctuary of memory and meaning. Thunder stood nearby, his silhouette framed by the flickering flames, his eyes reflecting the quiet strength that had carried us through. The necklace was nearly complete, a shimmering circle of stones that told a story of survival and beauty born from hardship. Martin's hands trembled slightly as he added the final touches, a silent testament to the love and dedication poured into this creation. As I watched, I felt a profound understanding settle over me. True treasure is never just material. It is the stories we carry, the love we share, and the legacies we choose to keep alive. And in this place, with thunder by my side, those treasures were finally free to shine. The garden blossomed, but so did the tensions that had quietly settled beneath the surface. The arrival of Lucas, though a balm to old wounds, also stirred memories and questions that had long been left unspoken. The family's history, tangled and painful, wasn't just a chapter to be closed, it was a living presence, reminding us that the past demands reckoning before peace can truly take root. One afternoon, as the sun leaned low and cast a golden hue over the orchard, I found Lucas sitting alone beneath the apple tree, a weathered photograph in his hands. The lines on his face deepened with a mix of sorrow and determination. "I need to tell you something," he said without looking up. "There's more to Elizabeth's story, something Ezra never told me." My heart tightened. The secrets this family carried were heavier than I'd imagined. Lucas explained that during the war, Elizabeth had been forced into decisions that haunted her final days. The gemstones weren't just valuables to protect, they were symbols of sacrifices made to shield those she loved. But some choices had come at great cost, and not all had survived the storm. He spoke of a betrayal that fractured the family, a hidden truth that threatened to undo the fragile peace we'd built. The jewels embedded in thunder were only part of a larger Weber story of loss, loyalty, and the price of survival. I listened, the weight of his words pressing down like the thick summer heat. This was no longer just about treasures or legacy. It was about confronting ghosts that refused to rest. Determined to face the past, we agreed to search for the missing pieces to uncover what had been lost and make sense of the shadows that lingered. Our journey led us to distant towns, dusty archives, and conversations with those who had known Elizabeth in her final years. Each step peeled back layers of history, revealing a tapestry woven with courage, sorrow, and unexpected kindness. One evening, in a quiet library filled with the scent of old paper and polished wood, I came across a letter fragile and faded that Elizabeth had written but never sent. In it, she confessed her fears, her hopes, and the love that had sustained her through the darkest days. Reading her words, I felt connected to her in a way I never had before. Her courage was not just in hiding gems or surviving where it was in daring to hope, to dream, even when the world threatened to crush those dreams. Back at the ranch, Martin was finishing the necklace. The stones, once scattered and silent, now spoke in a language of resilience and beauty. Each gem was a testament to Elizabeth's spirit and the journey we had all taken. Thunder, standing proud and steady, seemed to carry not just the scars of his past, but the promise of a future rooted in hope. As the necklace was placed in a handcrafted wooden box, ready to be shared with the world, I realized that our story, his story, was about more than survival. It was about the enduring power of love, memory, and the legacies we choose to honor. The ranch had become a sanctuary, a place where past and present met, and where the true treasure was found, not in stones but in the bonds we forged. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air, but there was an undeniable electricity in the way we moved forward together, yet carrying the scars and secrets that time had not yet fully healed. The necklace sat complete now, a shimmering circle of history and hope resting in its box, ready to fulfill the promise Elizabeth had made long ago. Lucas and I spent hours talking under the wide sky, his voice steady but laced with a new vulnerability. The family's fractured history was a tapestry woven with both triumph and tragedy, and only by facing it head-on could we hope to find true peace. We agreed that the necklace and the story it held needed to be shared, not hidden away. Elizabeth's legacy wasn't meant to be locked away in silence or buried beneath years of pain. It was a beacon, a testament to the power of art, love, and resilience. But the path wasn't simple. Lucas carried burdens that went beyond lost old grudges, and mistrust still whispered between the lines of his family's past. Ezra's absence, the years of searching, and the weight of unspoken regrets pressed on him like an invisible chain. I saw the way Thunder seemed to understand too. The horse who had carried those stones beneath his skin was more than a survivor. He was a bridge between the past and the future, embodying the strength that comes from enduring hardships and choosing loyalty. One evening, as a storm rolled in from the horizon, we gathered around the fire, Martin, Lucas, Claire, and me. The rain tapped a steady rhythm on the roof, and the flickering flames cast shadows that danced like memories come alive. We talked about what Elizabeth's dream had been, not just to protect her work or her stones, but to inspire hope in a world that had forgotten how to believe in beauty, to remind us that even in the darkest times, there is light worth fighting for. The necklace then became a symbol of that feat that promised that the past could be honored without being a chain, and that love could transform pain into purpose. Lucas, after years of carrying his own silence, spoke finally of forgiveness, of forgiving himself and others. The walls that had separated the family began to crumble, replaced by understanding and shared determination. The next day, we prepared to send the necklace to a museum dedicated to wartime art and resilience, a place where Elizabeth's work would be celebrated and her story told to the world. As I watched the box being carefully packed, a deep sense of closure settled over me. This was not just an end, but a beginning, a chance for the past to breathe new life through the stories we tell and the treasures we keep alive in our hearts. Thunder stood beside me, calm and steady, his presence a quiet reminder that loyalty and courage endure beyond years and hardship. I knew then that the true treasure wasn't the stones or the legacy alone, but the connections we forged, the healing of wounds, the breaking of silence, and the courage to keep moving forward. Our journey had been long and winding, filled with pain and hope, secrets and revelations. But in the end, it was the unbreakable bonds between us, between man and horse, past and present, love and loss, that shone brightest. The morning air was crisp and still, as if the world itself held its breath for what was to come. The necklace, now safely sealed in its box, lay ready to begin its new journey, not just across miles, but across hearts and generations. Elizabeth's legacy was no longer hidden beneath skin or shadow. It was poised to shine in the light of day, a testament to survival, love, and the enduring power of hope. I stood beside Thunder in the corral, feeling the familiar strength beneath his calm surface. For 8 years he had been more than a horse. To me he was a companion, a guardian of secrets, and a symbol of resilience. The strange swelling on his leg that had once troubled me now felt like a scar of a story much larger than either of us. Lucas joined us, his face softened by the weight of the past lifting slowly from his shoulders. The years of searching, of grief and silence had led to this momentous, fragile piece woven from pain and forgiveness. We watched Thunder move with the grace that belied the burden he had carried. His gait was steady, his eyes clear and trusting. He was a living bridge between worlds, the past filled with danger and desperation, and the present filled with understanding and possibility. The day we sent the necklace away, a quiet ceremony unfolded. We gathered in the small orchard Elizabeth had dreamed of restoring, now blooming with flowers and plants that thrived despite drought and hardship. Each bloom was a symbol of renewal, much like the story we shared. Claire read aloud from Elizabeth's journal one final time, her voice steady and full of reverence. The words carried through the air, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, there is light worth seeking. "This necklace," Claire said, "is more than just a piece of jewelry. It is the embodiment of courage, love, and the unyielding spirit to protect what matters most." I felt a swell of pride mixed with a bittersweet ache. The necklace would live on, but so would the bonds we had forged, the friendships, the family healed, the memories cherished. Lucas placed his hand on Thunder's flank, a silent thank you to the horse who had borne their burdens without complaint. "You carried more than stones," he whispered. "You carried hope." As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the ranch, I knew that the true treasure wasn't just the necklace or the gemstones. It was the journey itself, the stories we told, the wounds we healed, and the love that endured beyond all odds. Thunder nuzzled my shoulder, grounding me in the moment. His quiet strength had been my anchor through every twist and turn. We had faced the mysteries, the losses, and the secrets of a lifetime, and come through stronger. And in that strength, I found peace. The necklace was gone now, but its spirit remained woven into the land, the people, and the horse who had carried it all. As I looked out over the fields, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise that some treasures aren't just hidden in the earth or in stone. They live in the hearts of those who dare to protect and remember. And that, Kuzanim, is the true story of Thunder, the horse who carried not just gems, but the legacy of love and resilience. If you were in his boots, would you have fought the same battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video. Explore the other videos on screen. There's more stories waiting for you. Thanks for riding with us.